In this video, we will talk about planning and drafting. We're still working from Booth, Kalam, and Williams, 2003, book The Craft of Research, published by the University of Chicago Press. And this video is based on chapter 12 in that book. We will begin by talking about preliminaries to drafting. Then we will discuss the planning process itself, and specifically we will talk about 4 traps you want to avoid while planning your writing. We will discuss how you could actually plan for drafting, and we will touch on how to avoid plagiarism and discuss what beginner and experienced researchers think about after they have finished their first draft. And we will also give some recommendations about how you could use quotations and paraphrase in order to avoid plagiarism. So you're ready to write your first draft, and at this stage, and always really, it's really helpful to think first and then start working, and planning helps enormously at this stage, right? So you always want to think why and how you want to draft your work. Okay, and Booth, Kalam, and Williams discussed that there are 2 types of drafting: exploratory drafting and planned drafting. And in their opinion, uh, if you are working to some deadline, you want to maybe choose planned drafting because you might not have enough time to just do exploratory drafting and then revise and then, finish the final product by a deadline that you have. So they recommend some sort of planned drafting. Okay. Overall, I think it depends on many things, but it's useful, of course, if you have a planned um, drafting process. In general, I guess the best advice would be to start early and be ready and plan for a lot of revisions. And according to Chapter 12 and Booth, Kalam, and Williams, um, 2 styles of purposeful drafting are the most common among researchers. So the first style is quick and dirty, right? It's when you just, as soon as you are ready to draft, you just start write and keep writing, and whatever comes to your head, whatever you think about. And the second style of drafting is slow and clean, when you slowly think through each sentence and add them one by one. So according to Booth, Kalam, and Williams, slow and clean drafting, um, or quick and dirty drafting, either of them, I guess, depend on many. The choice of them among them depends on many things like your character, your predisposition, your training, perhaps. I don't know, what the kind of work you're doing, your level of expertise in the field, right? But overall, they recommend that perhaps quick and dirty drafting might be better because that kind of drafting is kind of easier to revise later. Whereas if you choose the slow and clean type of purposeful drafting, it might be very, very painful to revise later. Well, I guess you have to decide for yourself. Is just know that both are fine as long as you get your job done. Okay, as long as you get your writing finished and you are satisfied, and your readers are more or less satisfied with the product, right? I guess one more thing that could be recommended at this stage is it's important to create some ritual for writing, right? Set some daily commitments, maybe like you want to write at least 1 hour or 30 minutes or more or less, and something like page goals, perhaps like maybe 2 or 3 pages per day or 10 pages per day, depending on what you're working on, right? It's important to plan those things, to create some space for yourself, make sure that you have all the equipment, all the writing tools, all the things that you need for your writing ready before you start working, right? So really think why and how you will draft, prepare, and plan. So when you're planning, it's really kind of difficult to plan how to draft, how to write your first draft, even, right? And it's because when you are a beginner, you're learning how to write, while at the same time discovering what to write, right? You're learning the subject matter, and you're learning how to write. So it's difficult. And Booth, Kalam, and Williams distinguish four major traps that they recommend beginning writers to avoid. And the first trap is try not to organize your report around your assignment. So if there is an assignment you're working on, and there's like some obvious structure that this assignment, you know, kind of implies, you don't have to organize it around that implication, right? You unless you really don't know how to write better, or you do not know what alternative structure can be used in your writing, or unless your assignment like strongly requires strictly requires you to follow that kind of structure, right? um, Instead, think about how you can best respond to the main task in your assignment. How can you respond in a better way to the question posed? Okay. The second trap to avoid is try not to summarize sources, right? Avoid what Booth, Colum, and Williams call kilting, right? When you just kind of uh, put together pieces of summaries from different sources, right, without any analysis, right? Instead, add your own analysis as much as possible, write in your own voice, in your own words. The third trap to avoid is please don't structure the report around the topics of your data, right? For example, if your data has some very straightforward categories, it doesn't mean that you have to organize your report around that, right? Instead, develop and add some analytical categories that are not directly tied to the topics of your data. That's much more interesting. That's much more professional, I would say. The fourth trap to avoid is not just is don't structure your report around a story of your research. This is really often done by very beginner researchers. Like they say, first I did that, and then second I found this, and then that led me to this third thing, and blah blah blah. So don't do that. It's not like nobody cares, but yes, nobody cares about how exactly step by step, which step followed which other step in how you did your research. Instead, again, offer analysis, analytic categories. Uh, Tell readers a story about that is answering your research question, not a story of how you did your research step by step. Okay. Well, once you are ready to draft, you want to have a plan for your draft, right? So, our book, chapter 12, recommends that you want to first decide where you want to locate your main point, right? So usually you really have only two choices. You can put your main point, your main claim into the intro or into the conclusion, right? So the choice of these two options is kind of determining the social contract with your readers, right? If you locate your main point in the introduction, you're already kind of telling the reader, here's the answer to my research question, right? And kind of you're giving more control to the reader, right? It's also called like point first structure. And then if the reader thinks that they want to know more, they go and read the full paper, right? That is very common in some fields. For example, in economics, you're expected to provide your answers even in the abstract and in the introduction. Well, it might not be common in your specific field, so find out. But in general, I personally think that stating your main point in the introduction is better. So if you decide to choose the second option, stating your main point in the conclusion, that is more like you are in like you're. This is a more controlling kind of relationship towards your reader. You're kind of telling your reader, hey, I'm in control here. I'm gonna I'm going to let you know what I found when I'm ready or when I want you to find this out, right? So think about it, and you have to make that decision when you're planning. Next, you want to plan for a working introduction. Usually, good introductions offer some very brief context. They specify the questions you are pursuing in your work and why they are important. That is the motivation for your work. And also, as I said here, often the good introductions provide a brief answer to those questions. Next, in your plan for your first draft, you want to think about how you want to organize the body of your report, right? The main, kind of the bigger part of your research paper, thesis, or dissertation, right? So, really, there are four things you want to think about. First, your body should should offer the reader the necessary background, kind of. These sections are really often called the background sections, right? You provide some literature reviews, some definitions, some conditions, things that the reader needs to know in order to understand the rest of the paper, right? Then the second thing you want to think about when planning the body for your report is you want to find the best order in which you will provide your reasons and evidence, right? And there are several possibilities. You can go from old to new. Really, people prefer, finding out something new after they are reminded about something that they know already. Then you might go from shorter and simpler to longer and more complex. You can go from something uncontested to more contested. You can go in the chronological order. You can provide things just in the order that you find logical. And also, there is another possibility: discuss concessions and conditions first, then state that you are aware of the possible objections, and then provide your own evidence that is supporting your claim and reasons, right? So, really, always think about what must your readers know before they can understand what comes next. The third thing when planning the body of your report is to locate acknowledgments and responses, right? And the book offers various useful strategies on page 199. Um, Finally, you want to think about where you're going to locate warrants, right? If you think that the reader is unlikely to just very easily see the connection between your claim and reasons, then provide warrants and really wisely think about where you're going to locate those warrants. Um, so let's move to something we should avoid at all costs: plagiarism. Okay, so this is the worst thing that could happen to a researcher, and often, uh, you know, uh, well, I hope you guys do not do purposeful plagiarism. That is horrible. Don't ever do that. But what happens to many researchers, especially beginner researchers, and even some mature researchers, right, is inadvertent plagiarism. When they do that, without kind of realizing it, and very often that comes from careless not note taking. So, as we discussed in some earlier videos about literature reviews, please be very careful when you are taking notes while doing your literature reviews. You want to be a careful and thoughtful researcher, okay? Um, so, it's always useful to remember that plagiarism is whenever, intentionally or not, whenever you use someone else's words or ideas but fail to credit that person, okay? That leads your readers to think that those words are yours, okay? So that happens when, usually, if you do not cite the source, and sometimes, even when you cite the source, but if you use the same words without quotation marks, that's still plagiarism. All right? You want to avoid straightforward plagiarism of words, and to do that, you have to use quotation marks and cite the source simultaneously together. Okay? You want to avoid the plagiarism of ideas. Do give credit wherever you can. And in cases when, maybe you came up with something, and you came up with some idea or something new, you think, which is something new, but later through reading sources, different papers or books, you find out that somebody actually already published this point that you thought you came up with and you thought that was new, right? And in this situations, really priority of publication is the basis to decide who's plagiarizing and who's not. So the person who published and made his ideas or her ideas public first is the original author. And if you are doing it afterwards, you are plagiarizing, even if you didn't intend to, even if you honestly came to those ideas, right? So again, guys, do lit reviews, read in your field, stay current in the literature. Okay, be current in the literature, know what's been published many years ago, and in addition to what's published recently. Okay, sometimes we might, there are borderline cases, like when you are stating very widely known things like, Watson Crick, their DNA discovery and things like that. If when you discuss those kind of facts, which are very widely known, if you do not cite, it could be plagiarism, could be not. Better be safe and cite things, right? Consult your librarian, your professors, get feedback on your drafts, okay? Also, you want to avoid what's called indirect plagiarism of words. When you paraphrase, you credit the source, but your paraphrase is so close to the original that it's still plagiarism. Okay, so be careful of that. Finally, let's talk about what happens when you finish your first draft, right? So both Clum and Williams, they say that there are what really distinguishes beginner researchers from experienced researchers is their attitude after they have finished their first draft. So beginners think, yay, I'm done. I just need to kind of run the spell check and edit here and there, and I'm gonna print and submit. Whereas experienced researchers, they congratulate themselves on their first draft, but they understand that the first draft is another challenge. Okay, after they have done that, they know that now there comes the difficult but often rewarding work, which is revision, revision, and revision. Okay, so just be aware of that. Your first draft is a huge milestone, but it doesn't stop there. Your writing continues. All right. Also this book, both Clum and Williams, they give very nice advice about how you can use quotations and paraphrase. That's on pages 205 and 207. So if you are a very beginner and you really don't know how to paraphrase, how to use quotations, use that or use any other source that you find useful. For example, there are, I think APA manual provides some very useful examples and guidelines. So thanks for watching. See you later.